A Pilgrimage for Brian Haw, A Spiritual Journey of Relevance, from the ruins of Barking Abbey to Canterbury Cathedral by Lady Miller. That's me. Right, we've just come along from Golden Hill to Canterbury Cathedral, come through the main gates, and we're about to enter the cathedral itself. Right, the sight that greets you after you pass through the cathedral gate is another picture to behold. On this day, and as I looked upon it, the cathedral's twin towers were silhouetted by a perfectly clear and light blue sky. The cathedral stood majestically in its beauty, and I wondered how on earth it could have been built by the hand of man and without any machinery at all. It may have been built as a testament to God, but to me it was a testament to the capability of the men who built it. How did they do that? Answers on a postcode to how on earth did they do that competition? P.O. Box, my God. I then wandered into the cathedral itself, and I was confronted with even more of its majesty. I walked along the north aisle, on the outside of the nave, and along to the choir before reaching the Trinity Chapel. I couldn't help but be taken by how magnificent it all was. I always thought that St Margaret's Church by the ruins of Barking Abbey was exceptional in its beauty inside, but you could take that exception, times it by 10, and you may still not achieve the remarkability of the interior of Canterbury Cathedral itself. I carried on walking back along the south aisle, and at a very slow pace, taking in the size of the chambers, the height of the pillars supporting the archways, the adorning statues, the stonemason carvings, and the true magnificence of the stained glass windows. I completed a full clockwise circle of the main chambers of the cathedral before I ventured down into the crypt. This was it then, the end of my pilgrimage. And as I walked down the steps and into the chamber of the crypt, I finally began to feel the sense of completion and finality. It was dark as I initially entered, but it was not as dark as I expected. Subtle electric lighting was immediately introduced to me, and it presented some dome-like chambers which were set back into the walls and gave the feeling of man-made caverns. As I walked further along, the crypt opened up and natural light showered in from exterior windows. I once again completed a full circuit and in a clockwise direction before I entered the Chapel of St Mary in order to light my candle and say my prayers. The Chapel of St Mary exists in the centre of the crypt, and the altar resides before some chairs, which form a single row in a line that can be best described as a U-shape. The chapel is not enclosed by walls, but instead is open to the rest of the crypt, with only a gap in the middle of the row of chairs designating the entrance to its nave. There is a step with a lower barrier before the altar, and on each side of the barrier there is a stand which hosts tea-light candles which can be lit in prayer. As I entered, I took my backpack off and placed it on one of the chairs. I then approached the raised step which was set before the statue of St Mary, and I knelt down to say a prayer of thanks for my safe arrival and for all the kindness I had been shown by the people throughout my journey. I then said another prayer, reaffirming the reason for my pilgrimage. I prayed for the world in which I wished to live, and I prayed that Brian Haw would be remembered, and I thanked him once more. After I did that, I went to the candle box and took one to light. I lit the candle from the flame of one that was already alight on the candle stand, and I returned to my kneeling position while holding it and said a prayer for the good health of all my family. After which I placed the candle on the stand and returned to take another candle from the box, lighting it from the one I had just placed, before returning to my kneeling position once more. While holding this candle, I said a prayer for Canon Gordon Tarry, for his congregation, and for all of the people of Barking, wishing them peace and love. I then placed this candle on the stand and took another one to light from the one I had just placed. I knelt again to say a prayer for all of my closest friends, who I had so much love for, and I went on to place the candle once more. I took another candle, lit it, and I knelt to pray for the abundance of Andy and Val, and for the good grace that they would be successful in all that they do. I went on to place that candle on the stand before taking another and repeating the process of lighting it before kneeling down to pray once more. This time I said a prayer of thanks to all the people who were kind to me and who had helped me on my journey. I wish them peace and love too. I placed that candle on the stand and took another one to light. With this one, I prayed for the world in which I wish to live, a world which is not controlled by money, but is filled with peace, love and truth. I rose from my kneeling position and I placed it on the candle stand before I went to take my last one, to say my last prayer. I took a candle and lit it by the flame of my last, and I knelt down to say a prayer for Brian Hall. I prayed in thanks for all he had done. I prayed that he would rest in peace, and I prayed that he would never be forgotten. After a period of time, I rose once more and went to the candle stand to place my 7th and last candle. There was a donation box by the stand, and I wondered how much I should give, as much as I felt was right, I guessed. And I figured that £10 for each candle was reasonable. They didn't cost much to produce, and the church had a lot of money had more money than I did, so I thought that was fair enough. I paid my last respects and I left the chapel at St Mary. I then continued to depart from the crypt itself, walking up the set of steps on its south side to re-enter the cathedral. As I entered the light once more and came out by the choir, I felt a sense of job well done. That may seem like a poor use of terminology to use to describe the moment, but it's the phrase which best expresses the feeling that I had at the time. And I felt pleased that I had finally completed my undertaking. But what was I going to do next? I looked around and saw that there was a passage leading underneath the choir. Just wait for this to pass. It's fire brigade. Hope it weren't my candles. Hope everyone's okay, whatever happened there. I hadn't, I'll go back, but what was I going to do next? I looked around and saw that there was a passageway leading underneath the choir. I hadn't been through there before, and as I followed it to come out by the entrance to the crypt once again, when I reached that point, I became aware of singing emanating from outside, and so, being quite inquisitive, I decided to follow the sound, and I immediately discovered the door which led out into the cloisters. As soon as I opened the metal latch and went through the large wooden door, I was bathed in the heavenly vibrations from the sound of the cathedral choir. The sound was magical, and as I walked further along the cloisters and peered through its windowless window arches, I saw the choir's entire accompaniment standing in rows together on the grass and in the middle of the cloister square. They were all dressed in civilian clothes, so it was clear that they were rehearsing. And what a rehearsal! What a rehearsal! I found my way around to the east side of the cloisters and sat on a windowless ledge to watch and hear them. As I sat there, enjoying the direct rays of sunshine once more, I was completely taken with the moment. It was so beautiful. I'd never in all of my life heard such a sweet and pure sound before. But nay, I'm serving the description of its vibration and injustice, for it possessed qualities far from the reaches of pure beauty, and 'twas a sound simply described as angelic. The choir continued to practice, ceasing their singing at points and repeating different phases in order to achieve their perfection. But the short interruptions mattered not to me, as I felt the warmth of the sun as their sweet song appeared to massage my very being, and in the moments when they were in full accord, the feeling I felt was heavenly. Within half an hour, their practice session had come to an end, and the people who created that most wonderful reverberation went their separate ways and divided into groups composed of only fractions of the entire accompaniment. I sat for a while longer, and then I decided it was time for me to leave. It was just before 2 o'clock, and I felt like the time was right to find Miriam. I peacefully left the tranquillity of the cloisters and confines of Canterbury Cathedral. I walked out of the cathedral gates and into the sunshine that was saturating the small medieval square in Sun Street. Got an asterisk. In January 2012, while I was on my pilgrimage revisited and taking the pictures to accompany this account, I entered the cloisters via the same wooden door and saw 2 tourists further along the corridor, being given a tour by one of the cathedral guides. Literally, just at the moment when I passed by the small group, the guide pointed to the ceiling of the cloisters, which is adorned with many symbols within its beautiful stonework. And he said, half of all these symbols you see here are pagan in their origin. Those were the only words I heard him say to the tourists as I passed, and it was just before I took the photo of the cloisters. I only mention this because it was very peculiar the way it happened, and it does give some legitimacy to the statement I made earlier in this book, and at the point where I encountered Benjamin on the first day. Right, gonna leave that there. Thank you, Brian.